Greetings, YouTube. I've been a lifelong fan of science fiction. I can remember fondly watching the Disney show every Sunday night, eating up the sections that were about the future that they do concerning space flight, trips to the Mars and the moon, and orbital habitat that only existed in the minds of the people that drew them. As I got older, I found comic books, and then when I hit 6th grade, I found actual science fiction novels. And when I started reading science fiction novels, I started big. I went with Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 Space Odyssey. So I went out of the gate and hit the ground running. From that point, I ate the stuff up. I read quite a bit of fantasy in my day, but I loved science fiction. And I enjoyed the hard science fiction most of all, science fiction that seemed just that far away from being real. The stuff that you could almost reach out and touch. Those were always my favorites. And it should be no surprise that my favorite film of all time is Blade Runner, because it has such a wonderful texture to it. It seems so close to what we have now that I believed it when I saw it. And it seems like something that could come true even now. But at one time, rocketry, space travel, wasn't something that just science fiction authors dreamed of. There were serious amateur movements for spaceflight at one time. In 1938, there was a club in Germany founded by enthusiasts. It existed for, 1932, I think. Yeah, it existed for 6 years. Hitler shut it down and had all the information from the club absorbed into the Nazi Party, taking one of its members, one von Braun, and putting him in charge. And he became the person that invented the V-1 and the V-2 rockets. Of course, he came to work for us after the war and helped start our rocket program that eventually landed us on the moon. But even after that, there was an amateur rocket movement that attempted to get something known as the Project Orion off the ground, literally in this case. And Project Orion was interesting because the people involved in it had a background in physics, math, and nuclear science. These were people who had been involved with actually designing and utilizing nuclear devices during and after World War II. And they wanted to use these things in a peaceful manner. And the Orion project concept was, essentially, you put a nuclear device on the ground, you put a spaceship on top of it with a really heavy shield, and then you detonate the bomb. The explosion literally kicks the ship into orbit. The ship then jettisons another nuclear device, fires it again, and it uses these things that go boop, 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 picking up speed with each progressive explosion of a nuclear device. Of course, eventually there were bans on testing, and then they began to realize how incredibly dangerous nuclear fallout really was. Initially, when people thought it, while they knew it was dangerous, they never realized that an incredibly small quantity of the stuff you needed to completely screw up somebody's genes. But it was a wonderful idea, and the idea was really fostered by amateurs. They may have been professional scientists, but they were doing this on their own. They weren't doing this as part of a government policy. Eventually, the Project Orion was absorbed by the U.S. military and eventually found to be lacking, so it was never put into play. But now, in the 21st century, we're right back to amateur spaceflight again. You have the SpaceX program, which is launching, I believe, this week, something known as the Falcon 1. And we have a number of other people that are trying to launch their own crafts into orbit, which I think is really important. We need to get the plans and the projects for spaceflight out of the hands of government, who are going to do everything at far too high a cost, and overblown projects because it's a bureaucracy. And it can be done simpler and cheaper by individuals, or at least groups of individuals. Yes, I realize that eventually, to get this to become a commercial endeavor, you will have to involve government regulations, which will be required and are needed. But for the initial testing, the stuff that the Wright brothers kind of thing, you need small groups of people who are willing to take risks, who are willing to go out there and try things that no government agency is ever going to allow. That's what you need to get us off the Earth and into orbit and into our system on a permanent basis. Because at the moment, all of our eggs are in one basket, the planet. I would like to have those eggs spread around a little. I'd like to see colonies on the Moon, on Mars, at the L5 point, in the asteroid belt, out amongst our systems, satellites, planets, things like that. We could learn more. We open our horizons. We have gained access to incredibly huge amounts of resources, power, metals, you name it. It's out there if we can go get it. We can move some of our production facilities from the planet into orbit, where there's a whole lot less to pollute. So I'm a big proponent of space, particularly being done, space travel, particularly being done by amateurs. Yes, I know eventually all the governments will get involved, and that's okay. Right now, what we really desperately need is the Wright brothers.